Hi, my name is Imran Haque and welcome to another episode of The Voice of a Leader, a series where I interview high-achieving leaders and try and find out how they got to where they are. What are you waiting for? For many students, high school is a main gateway to entering into university. And for many students, in particular those from Asian backgrounds, including myself, if you perform well in high school, then it opens up the door to three main opportunities, or three main jobs. You're either an accountant, a doctor, or a lawyer. This week, I caught up with Jeremy Ludowyke, who is the current principal at Melbourne High School. Jeremy, welcome to The Voice of a Leader. So you're born in Sri Lanka in 1955, and then you immigrated to Australia in 1957 during the White Australia policy era. Can you tell me more about what the environment was like back then?
Yes, well, it's probably even worse than that. I mean, my background is sort of post-colonial, if you like, and European colonial, and therefore in my own country, in my country of birth, in Sri Lanka, I would have been regarded as European. Right. And of course, under the White Australia policy, you actually had to demonstrate your European heritage to be able to come to Australia. But when I arrived in Australia, and I was of I'd say, swarthy complexion, sure. and it's a family that was fairly well off, which was not usual in terms of migration patterns. We moved right into middle class suburbia, sure. And I can remember the entirety of anyone I saw was Anglo-Celtic. Right. When I went to school for the first time, there was ourselves and a family who were of Greek heritage. But everyone else in the whole of the school was of Anglo-Celtic heritage. Oh, wow. And I can remember literally people stopping on the street and staring at us as if we were some sort of strange exotic beast almost. Yeah. So, and yet I can also remember my mother, for example, going around correcting people's English. And you can imagine how that would have gone down. Yeah, true. So it was culturally very peculiar, sure. To be coming from an environment where you were regarded as European into an environment in an environment that was not European, yeah. Coming to an environment and a culture that was European and being regarded as not European. So I certainly grew up with a very fine sort of understanding of how sophisticated cultural difference can become.
Well, it's changed a lot since then.
Yes.
So you became a principal at 32 years age. I think that must be some sort of record.
I don't know, and I don't know if it's a record I particularly would claim to hold or be proud of holding. But yes, that's an interesting trajectory of itself. I finished school young. I completed school, and I'm a graduate of the school I'm now a principal of when I was 16. So I guess I was fast-tracked in a sense, even in my initial education. I was always determined. I knew that what I wanted to do was to be a teacher, and must say, as soon as I started teaching, the very first lesson I taught, I thought, this is it. This is it for me. I've found my calling, and yet I was fortunate in being at a school that was a brand new school, and so in a way it was inventing itself anew each year as it grew. And therefore there was a lot of opportunity to become involved in positions of leadership. So literally in my second year I was already operating at what would be called a leading teacher level, really out of necessity of the small scale of the school. And I found it was something I was very good at, and it's a point that I've often made about a quirkiness about the career trajectory of teachers and principals. The skills and the attributes that make for a very good teacher are not essentially anything to do with the skills of an administrator or of an educational leader. They're a completely different skill set. And I found increasingly that I was drawn to the capabilities that were involved in school leadership, and being in a sort of a serendipitous opportunity to quickly, if you like, move through the ranks. I was lucky to, in a sense, be so early into the profession, and now I'm very much one of the elder statesmen after I've lost count, but I think it's probably about 25 years now.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Because as you mentioned, you're the current principal of Melbourne High School, and that's renowned as the most prestigious and oldest state government schools in Victoria. You can actually tell from outside. It looks like a castle, like medieval times. Yep. So it's a selective school for boys only from years 9 to 12. So what's the selection process like?
Well, the selection process, any student, any boy
Sure.
in any school, government or non-government, anywhere in Victoria, or for that matter interstate and overseas, who is in their second year of secondary education, and we use that term because some schools will fast-track kids
Sure.
like I was, and therefore you'd be a bit younger. But if you're in your second year of secondary education, you're eligible to sit for an entrance exam. The entrance exam is a mix of examination of prior learning, but also what you might call a competency or an ability test. So a bit like what you might find on an IQ test.
Yeah, sure.
And if anything, we privilege that component, the ability, rather than the prior learning. And the exam is set as part of department policy. And I'll say I have an issue with that being the selection process. Melbourne High School's philosophy in ever and a day has been about the concept of a well-rounded individual.
Sure.
And we, a whole program deliberately involves students exploring the breadth of what an educational opportunity can be. So academic ability is certainly core to that, but it is not all of that. And so therefore there's almost a contradiction in the school saying we're about well-roundedness, but we select you at entry only on the basis of your academic ability. For that very reason, we've introduced a Year 10 intake, which we select according to the school's philosophy.
Sure.
And tracking their movement through the school and therefore their later performance is been quite revelatory because they absolutely punch above their weight when it comes to things like positions of leadership, both within school and beyond. They really thrive in the opportunity that they have here to really immerse themselves in a breadth of experience. So whilst that's the policy, and will remain the policy because it's a government state policy,
Yep.
it's not one that I sit all that comfortably with.
No problem. So when you actually appointed, there was a number of strategic risks with
Yep.
the school, and one of them was the principal was expected to be seen as I probably said this wrong,
Yeah.
enlightened despot.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, I have no idea what that is. Can you please elaborate?
Yes. Well, the term comes from 18th century history, where the likes of Louis the Sun King, where they were seen as the sole source of authority, power, and leadership, but they would always act in the common good. And that forever and a day was the image, if you like, or the expectation of a leader of this school. And in a way, what happened just prior to my arriving at the school is a good example of the undoing of that. I'd also argue that in this day and age, that concept of a single leader, who in a sense, therefore, by necessity, is disempowering leadership within his institution
Yep.
or organisation, is a model of leadership we probably would not want to encourage anyway. But my predecessor had been ill for about 2.5 years, and the school had almost gone into entropy, in fact gone backwards.
Sure.
During that time, because there was no the empowerment of anybody else. The school had some fantastic managers in senior positions of leadership, but they'd never been asked to take any authority or initiative around leadership itself. So they could keep the design of the school and the mechanics of the school well oiled and running forever and a day. But if you asked them to redesign it, they'd panic, because that's never been an expectation of their role. So I've had to, in a sense, re-enculture and reconfigure the culture of the school around a more modern notion of distributive leadership. And it's proved to be, what should we say, almost an organisational contradiction. The authority to do that is seen as invested in one person. It reminds me of a scene in The Life of Brian where people keep on saying, we all must be leaders because you tell me that you must be a leader and you're the leader. So there's an inherent sort of loop that goes around. But I would say it's only now, after 11 years, that I've been able to embed that notion that there is a distribution of leadership, and with that comes the responsibility of owning not only the decisions, but the consequences of the decisions.
Good. So as a principal, you have a lot of expectations, and one of them is you engage with a lot of different parties. So not just students, you have alumni, teachers, even the community. And also, a lot of people probably don't know this, it's quite a varied role. So on top of being a principal, I guess on occasions you're expected to carry out the finance role, HR, sales and marketing.
Yep.
So it's a very varied role. What's some piece of advice you'd give others who are keen to become a high school principal?
Yeah. Look, I think there'd be a number of things. Firstly, and I've seen this in my colleagues, it's a job you would only do if you're absolutely passionate and driven to do it. There's that old medieval notion of a calling, and unless you felt that this was something you wanted to dedicate your life to, I would urge you not to do it.
Sure.
Because it's a job that can literally tear you in separate directions, or preoccupy every moment of your thought and mind. And it can't be healthy if it's going to be subsuming you in that way. So unless it's something you're driven to do, then reconsider. A key component, I think, and something that is not recognised often by leaders of any organisation, is that in the end, although this is an educational institution, the core of your role is that you are a curator of the culture and climate of your organisation, and that's true more so in a school than anywhere else. And curator is also an interesting term. It actually comes from the old notion of a curare or a cure, who was someone who looked after the health of a community, and that's your job. You look after the health of a whole community, and at the same time you are curating that. That is, you are looking at what needs to happen for it to continue to grow, foster, and nurture. And so that notion of, if you like, looking after a place as a sort of a profession of service, not out of a profession of leadership, is absolutely core to the role. The other component of it that I would give as advice to people who are considering being a principal is you will come to school each day, and if you're one of those people who work from a to-do list, you are going to be bitterly disappointed. One of the joys of my job is I don't know when I arrive each day what's going to happen. All hell can break loose. I can be dealing with anything, as I have literally in the last month, from the death of a student overnight to the cancellation of a trip because of the terrorist attacks in Europe.
I understand.
And be going into sort of full, if you like, overdrive mode straight away. Or I could be sitting at my desk and have to entertain myself. So you've got to be prepared for, if you like, to go with the flow of whatever comes. You've got to be fairly zen in this job.
No problem. Excellent. Jeremy, thank you once again for taking some time out of your day to give a background on yourself and the school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you again for watching another episode of The Voice of a Leader. Jeremy mentioned many points on if you're keen to becoming a principal. One that really stood out is you need to have a passion for the job. Like many things in life, if you don't have the passion there, it'll be very hard to drive and actually perform the work. Another very important point he mentioned was it's one of those jobs where anything can happen. So you've got to be very flexible. You can't just go down the same pathway. Things can be sporadic. Once again, thank you for watching another episode. Remember, if you or someone you know is a high-achieving leader would like to have an interview with me, please visit my website, answer 3 questions, and send an email to thevoiceofaleader@gmail.com. Also, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you're kept up to date with the series, and like my Facebook page. Thank you once again. Goodbye.